Hello, welcome to episode 43 of Daryl Show Your Work. In this episode, I'm going to be covering access control lists and different ways we can use them to enforce the privilege of least privilege and some shortcuts that we can take when it comes to assigning different privileges and things of that nature. For where I first want to start off is just showing how we can create the access control list and just to give a brief summary of exactly what an access control list for those watching that may not be aware, they are a list of rules that specifies which users or system processes can access a resource and what access they can perform. So again, this kind of goes this is kind of builds off of the previous video where I was focusing specifically on ways that we can set user privileges, file privileges, and things of that nature. And now we're going to build on that, and we're going to see how we can do those things using access control lists in specific. All right, so again, I want to start off by creating an access control list. So to do that, first we need a file to work with. So I'm going to create a test file here. So I'm going to use the touch command, and we're going to call this file one. All right, and now that we let's in order to create the access control list to associate with this file, I'm going to write get f as in file ACL, and then I'm gonna specify the file that I want to associate it with. All right. So pretty simple command. All right. So it gives us a header here as far as the file, who owns the file, which is me, since I'm Cali at Cali, and the group it belongs to, and by default it belongs to the Cali group. And it also lists out the user permissions, the group permissions, and everyone else's permissions when it comes to file one. Now, let's say that I wanted to see the file permissions without getting these headers. What I could do is I could simply add a dash C option here, and this will get rid of those headers. All right, so now I can just see, just if I could just get a list here of permissions for file one. So um, now let's go into how we can create some access control lists for groups. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to add a user to a group. So I'm going to say sudo group add. All right, so I'm going to create the group. So I'm going to call the group users one. All right, so I have to use sudo here because I need administrative permissions to do that. All right, I have to give it my password. All right, so it looks like users one group is created. Oh, so now I want to add a new user to that. So in order to do that, I'm going to go back here to my original command to for group add, and I'm going to modify it a bit. I'm going to say user add, since we're going to add a user to the group that we just created. I'm going to say dash G for group, and then I'm going to I'm going to create a user. Well, first I'm going to specify the user's group, and then I'm going to create a user called user one to add to that group. So the user add is what's adding what's adding the user to the group, and I'm specifying a group using the -G option, and the group name is the users one group that we just created in the line above. And then I'm going to be creating and adding a user one to the users one group. All right. So user one is the user, the new user, and users one is the group. All right. So I'm hit enter. All right. So it looks like that is done. No errors coming back. So now what I want to do is I want to update our the mask or the access control list to give user one read and write privileges, and also in file one to be able to inherit those same privileges as well. So what I would need to do is I would say set f as in file acl dash m for mask, and then u colon, and here's where I specify which user I'm talking about, which is user one. Then I'm gonna say colon, and then I'm gonna specify the permissions, which is read and write RW. All right, and then I'm gonna put a comma there, and I'm gonna say mask, M for mask, and then R for read. All right, and I'm gonna say file one. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna hit enter. All right, now for us to be able to check on those, I'm gonna go back in my history to see. So we're gonna check. We're gonna use the same command that we used before to check the permissions, and we're gonna check the permissions again here to see has that been updated. And we have, and we can compare it to what we see up here to what we initially checked before. All right, so we're gonna check that against that. All right. So we can see now that that user still has the read and write permissions. Now we've added user one to our to a group. Okay, and we can see now user one has read and write privileges, just like we do. So we see that when you say user in blank, that means the default user. So we giving user one the same permissions as we gave myself, which is read and write. All right, and then everything else appears to be the same, and then we also specified that we want the for the file for that mask to be set to read. All right, so we gave it that permission right here within that command line. All right, so similar to what we did in a previous video, let's say we wanted to set the ACLs using octal notation. And if you remember, octal notation is instead of putting read and write here, specifying that by letters, we're going to specify that using numerical values. So I'm going to use a real simple case here, because you remember when I used the example of it's easy to remember when you give someone all privileges. Remember 777 as in jackpot. Okay, so apply that same principle here as I'm writing this line. All right, so I'm gonna go back in my history and I'll make some adjustments here to set some permissions here using octational notation. So instead of putting RW here, I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to simply say 7. Now, based on my description of what jackpot means, what do you believe that 7 would do? If you guess 7 would give the user all permissions, read, write, and executions, you're absolutely right. All right, so I could get rid of. We're not changing the mask for this file, so we're going to leave that alone. All right, so the only thing we're changing here is the extent of user one's privileges when interacting with this file. So I'm gonna hit enter. All right, and then I'm going to check on to see if that actually took. All right, so now we can see not only did user one now have read, write, and execution privileges, but then it also updated the mask to have rewrite and execution privileges too. All right, so that's how we would assign a user privileges using octal notation. In this example, we just simply use 7 to give them all privileges when it comes to interacting with the file. Now, let's say we wanted to delete any sort of ACL entries for the user. All right, so let's say we wanted to take away the user's access to this file, them being able to have any sort of privileges. We don't want them to have any sort of access to it at all. So, in order to do that, go back here in my history. All right, we're going to still use the M flag. We're going to use the X flag. All right, and what that's going to do again is going to remove the ACL entry for this specific user. And let's see, some other things I need to change here. I specified the user, specified the file. So I need to get rid of, we're not giving the user permissions. So my syntax should be good here. I think I can get rid of this comma. All right, and let's see what happens. All right, no errors returned, which is always a good thing. All right, so let's see if user 1 still has access to this file. No user 1, we just see user, we just see a user, which is me, RW, and the mask now, if you notice too, that's returned back to having read-only privileges and when we got rid of user 1. So that's how, if you needed to update user access, let's say an employee of your enterprise or user of your enterprise, they've either exited your company or they moved into a new role and they no longer have any there's no longer any reason for them to have access to that document. This would be a way you could remove all accesses that they have to that document. That way, we don't have that privilege creep, and we are implementing the principle of least privilege here and only giving that person access to what they need to do their job, or no access at all if they've left the company or the area. Okay, so let's say we wanted to remove remove all the access controls placed on the file. Okay, so in order to do that, it's a pretty simple thing here. So we could go back to our command, and we could just erase all of this up to dash, and we're going to just say dash B. And uh, what this is going to do again, it's going to remove all the access control list controls placed on the file. So I'm gonna show you what I mean. I'm gonna hit enter. All right, and let's check on that to see what it gives us back. All right, so now mask is gone. Okay, so what that's done is removed all the access control list controls placed on the file itself. All right, so let's say we wanted to use an access control list to manage directories and users within those directories. So to get started doing that, I'm going to create a new user. All right, so I'm just going to do sudo useradd, and then we're going to call them user 2 since we already have a user 1. All right. All right. Also, I want to make a new directory. So we're going to make a new directory and we're going to call that simply files. All right. And the mkdir command is what makes a new directory. And then you specify what you want the new directory to be called after you've written the mkdir command. All right. So now let's check to see what the current default permissions are for this new directory. So I'm just going to say the getfacl files. That's our directory. All right. Hit enter. All right. So we can see that we automatically, myself, have a read, write, and execution privileges up to this directory. And on a group level, there's just read and execute, and everyone else just only has read and execute here. So um, let's say we wanted to add some users here to the group, and we wanted to give them specific privileges. So we're going to give them specific privileges based on octal notation. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go back in my history, and I'm going to modify a previous command so I'm not doing it from scratch. All right, so we want to give, but let me see, let me go back a little further. Okay, so we do want to give user one access to this directory. So what I need to do though, since we're talking about a directory here, I need to add to my command a D colon, bridge the space. All right, and then I want to specify that user one, I'm gonna put a 6 here. And what a 6 here is the same thing as RW. It's going to give them just read and write privileges. But I also want to do the same for user two. So I'm just going to write pretty much the same set of syntax here, except it's going to be user two instead of user one. All right, user two, and then colon 6. So we're going to give them read and write permissions as well. And this will also set the M flag is also going to set the ACL for the directory. All right, and you'll see what I mean here. No, let's see then. Oh, hold on, I need the files. That's right, 'cause I'm working with the directory. Okay. All right, so then we're gonna go and check to make sure that everything with that took. All right, so it's telling us that it's to letting us know that we have the defaults have been set. We have myself. I have read and write and execute privileges. And as I said, we set the privileges for user one and user two to read and write. Okay, and then the default mask privileges or the ACL privileges have been set to reflect whatever mines are. So it's going to have that read, write, and execute just like I do in a group, and the other stayed the same. All right, and so that's how some ways how we can set the default um, active control list parameters for a directory, and then how we can then set them for users that would be interacting with any sort of files in that directory. All right, so another thing I wanted that I wanted to touch on is an inheritance of a file inheritance of a directory's default permissions. So ideally when creating a file in a directory, it's supposed to inherit that directory's default permissions. So we want to be able to test that out here. All right, so um, since we're not, cause right now, hold on, I want to show you where we currently are right now to show you why I'm doing what I'm about to do. Even though we created a bunch of directories, if you look here, we're still in our home directory. So I'm going to switch over, and I'm going to combine some commands here. I'm going to first switch over to the files directory that we created and that we just set these permissions for, and or then the ACL permissions for. All right, and then I'm also semicolon. I'm also going to make a new directory, and I'm going to call that files one. Okay, and that's going to be our new directory. That's going to be the subdirectory under files. So I'm changing to the files directory, and I'm gonna change there, and then when I make a new directory, the files one directory is going to be a subdirectory under files. All right, so I'm gonna hit enter, and and now we can see that we're in the files directory, and let's make sure that our subdirectory is there. So I'm gonna do a list command, ls, and we can see that the files one command, excuse me, the files one subdirectory is there. Okay, so then I'm going to also create a new file for us to interact with. I'm going to say touch, and then we're going to simply call this files two. All right, list, just to make sure that that's there. All right, it is. Okay, so what I want to do, I want to make sure now that we created this files two, let's see if files two inherited the same permissions as the files directory. So remember, looking up here, these are the current permissions for the files directory, and we want to make sure that the new files two has the same permission structure as this directory. So let's see if it does. Okay, let's see. All right. So then we want to change this to files two. All right. So if we make a comparison, going up slightly up a little bit. Sorry, this lab is a little slow. Trying to get everything on the same screen here. Okay, so we can see that that the user us, for some reason, it looks like we only have read and write privileges here, which is real interesting. But then but also user one and user two has the read and write privileges as set by default. So and then as far as group privileges, that's read and execute. And so the mask is going to reflect our privileges. Again, for some reason, we don't have execute permissions, which is interesting. And then other actually only has read permissions. So this is real interesting. So because ideally everything is supposed to be inherited from the directory permissions. So if this was something that was like real vital as far as the permissions that are supposed to be here in terms of our permissions, those executable permissions, or in terms of what other people are supposed to do, we would probably just have to then manually add those permissions. But that's real interesting how it didn't add permissions for myself and then for others, but it set it for pretty much everything else. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to touch on, uh, let's say that we wanted to delete all the default access control lists from a directory. All right, and then we can use this using the K flag. So I'm gonna go back here in my history. Okay, and I could delete everything. Let me see, between files, because it's going to be a really short command. All right, so instead of using the M flag, we are going to use the K flag, and that's what's going. And we're going to take these from we're going to take all those privileges or all those permissions, access control list, entries from that particular directory. So you're going to see what I mean here. All right, so I'm hit enter. All right, then we're going to check on that. All right, so we can see that every place where it said default, if we go back up, everything that was here is now gone from that file directory. So it no longer has those default ACL permissions set for that particular file directory. And yeah, I mean that's pretty much the basis of what I wanted to show in this video. So again, just summarizing what we did here, we just briefly touched on what access control lists are, how we can then set access control lists for particular groups that we've added users in, and then how we can then use those access control lists to dictate what those users or those users in those groups, what they can do with a file, or how it is that they can interact with the file. And then we saw how we can then also do that using octal notation. And then we also saw how we could delete the ACL entries for an individual user, and then also how we could then apply access control lists directory wide, and then specifying user privileges within a particular directory, and then seeing how file inheritance works in terms of inheriting a directory's um, default permissions, well, at least partially. And then also, if we wanted to take away um, um, those access control lists and their permissions from a particular directory, how exactly we can do that. So please like, share, and subscribe. Most importantly, show your work. Until next time, take care of yourself and God bless.